November 24th, 1944, 21st Bomber Command HQ, Saipan, Mariana Islands. The briefing room went dead quiet. Major Robert K. Morgan, the Memphis Belle's old pilot now flying Dauntless Doy, got ready for takeoff. In the co-pilot's seat, Brigadier General Emmett O'Donnell Jr. would command the mission. Their target, the Musashino Aircraft Engine Factory in Tokyo. Total distance, 3,000 miles round trip. Fuel reserves were tight. Out on the runways, 111 B-29 Superfortresses waited on coral airstrips that hadn't even existed a year ago. Nobody in that room realized they were about to kick off something huge. The start of a campaign that would tear apart Japan's ability to fight. The Pacific War had taught American planners that Japan's home islands weren't just the enemy's last stand, and they were the engine room. Take out those workshops, and the whole imperial war machine would just stall. The B-29 Superfortress was a monster. The program ate up more money than any other weapon in U.S. history. $3.7 billion, even more than the Manhattan Project. All that cash was a gamble. Maybe strategic bombing alone could knock Japan out without a bloody invasion. Japanese cities turned out to be especially vulnerable. They weren't built like European ones. No stone, no concrete, just wood, paper, and narrow streets packed together. Firefighting? Almost non-existent. And their factories weren't grouped in big complexes. Instead, thousands of tiny workshops, often hidden in neighborhoods, kept the war effort alive. Bomb the cities, and you'd hit the factories too. General Hap Arnold had a wild idea for the 20th Air Force. For the first time ever, a strategic bombing force would act on its own, reporting straight to the Joint Chiefs of Staff, not just some field commander. The B-29s became America's unofficial third military branch before the Air Force was even a thing. The B-29 itself was a beast. 99 feet long, 141-foot wingspan, 4 giant engines pushing out 2,200 horsepower each. It could haul 140,000 pounds of plane and bombs way up above 31,000 feet. Pressurized cabins, remote control gun turrets, a central fire control system, all stuff that made older bombers look ancient. Then came Major General Curtis LeMay. He arrived at 21st Bomber Command on January 20th, 1945. Only 38, but already known as the sharpest mind in U.S. bombing strategy. Reports from Europe called him ruthless, methodical, and relentless. He'd grown up poor in Ohio, pulling night shifts at a steel mill to pay for engineering classes. That mix of grit and brains shaped everything he did, and it would change how America bombed. Each B-29 could carry 20,000 pounds of bombs, organize 500 of them, and that's 5,000 tons of explosives in one raid. The new M69 incendiary bomb, cooked up at Harvard and tested in Utah, was filled with sticky napalm that burned at 1,800 degrees Fahrenheit. Colonel Thomas Power, who ran the 314th Bombardment Wing, studied how the Japanese built their homes. No nails, just wood fitted together, tatami mats, paper-thin walls. One M69 could wipe out a house. Thousands could erase a city. Japan's air defenses in 1944 were thin. About 375 fighters split between 3 divisions. The best planes, like the Nakajima Ki-44 Shoki and Kawasaki Ki-61 High-End, could barely reach the B-29s flying at 25,000 feet or higher. Lieutenant General Masakazu Kawabe led the defense. He'd fought in China and Burma, and he knew Japan didn't have enough pilots or fuel. Training hours were cut to almost nothing. The experienced guys were mostly gone, lost over the islands. Their replacements, teenagers who'd barely learned to fly. Anti-aircraft guns weren't much better. Japan had Type 88 75mm guns that maxed out at 25,000 feet. Type 3 120mm guns that could stretch to 30,000 halan. But at those heights, hitting anything was pure luck, and shells were running low. Tokyo had the most flak guns in the country, but even there, it wasn't enough. Everywhere else, cities might have 100 or less, but the biggest weakness, firefighting, Japan just wasn't ready for what was coming. Tokyo's fire department was woefully outmatched. They had 280 hand pump engines and just 3 aerial ladder trucks to protect a city of 7 million. Most neighborhoods didn't even have enough water pressure to fight serious fires. Air raid shelters, hardly any. The government worried that building them would just scare people and wreck morale. The first big air attack, November 24th, barely did any damage, but it exposed a mess of problems. Out of 111 B-29 bombers, only 24 hit their main target. The rest, battling ferocious jet stream winds, something Japanese meteorologists had seen coming, but the Allies hadn't, ended up scattering bombs all over Greater Tokyo. These winds, blasting along at 200 mph, shoved bombers far off course. Precision bombing? Forget it. 17 planes ran out of fuel and had to ditch or make emergency landings. Despite the setbacks, Brigadier General Haywood Hansell stuck with high-altitude daylight raids through December and January. Results stayed lousy. Most days, thick clouds blocked the targets. The jet stream just kept flinging bombs into empty countryside, and the new R-350 engines were a nightmare. So many mechanical failures, so many missions aborted because of engine fires. By January 1945, the 21st Bomber Command had flown 14 missions against Japan and dropped 1,285 tons of bombs, losing 41 B-29s in the process. At this pace, they'd run out of planes long before they made a serious dent in Japanese industry. General Arnold, who'd already suffered 4 heart attacks, was running out of patience and time. On January 20th, he fired Hansell and put Curtis LeMay in charge. LeMay got a blunt order: get results, or he'd be out too. LeMay dove into the job. For 3 weeks, he picked apart every detail of the B-29 campaign. He flew on missions himself, squeezing into the co-pilot seat to watch the crews at work and see how the Japanese responded. He pored over weather data, factory reports, bomb damage assessments, everything. His conclusion flipped the script. The whole American bombing approach needed a shakeup. On February 4th, 1945, LeMay tried something new. He sent 129 B-29s to bomb Kobe with 159 tons of incendiaries and 13 tons of fragmentation bombs from high up. It worked better. City blocks burned where the firebombs landed, but clouds still messed with accuracy. He tried again on February 25th, this time over Tokyo. Now, 174 B-29s dropped 453.7 tons of incendiaries and managed to wipe out about a square mile of the city. Recon photos proved it. Fire did what high explosives couldn't, but LeMay knew it still wasn't enough. The real breakthrough came from the operations analysts. Their stats showed that B-29s actually took fewer losses from Japanese fighters and anti-aircraft fire at night and at lower altitudes below 10,000 feet. Turns out Japan barely had any night fighters left, and their heavy guns couldn't aim low enough to hit bombers flying under 10,000 feet. LeMay made a radical call. The B-29s would ditch almost all their defensive guns, keep only the tail, so they could carry more firebombs. They'd fly solo at night down between 5,000 and 9,000 feet, not in tight formations. With the extra room, each bomber could hold 12,000 pounds of incendiaries instead of the usual 5,000. March 9th, 1945, at 5:35 p.m., the first B-29 took off from Guam. This was Operation Meetinghouse, and in all, 334 Superfortresses from 3 bomber wings zeroed in on Tokyo for the biggest raid yet. The target, a 3-by-4-mile slice of the Shitamachi district, home to 750,000 people and thousands of tiny factories. Just after midnight on March 10th, pathfinders from the 314th Wing reached Tokyo, flying at 5,000 feet. They dropped M47 incendiaries, marking the target with a blazing X you could see from 50 miles away. The main force followed, timing their drops to overlap the fire zones. The M69 bombs worked just as planned. Each 500-pound cluster split open at 2,000 feet, scattering 38 bomblets across a 500-foot stretch. These bomblets punched through rooftops and 3 seconds later exploded in napalm, spraying burning gel in 100-foot arcs. Within half an hour, hundreds of fires joined into one giant inferno. Surface winds, 45 mph, thanks to a cold front, whipped the flames into a full-blown firestorm. On the ground, temperatures soared past 1,800 degrees Fahrenheit. The superheated air whipped up such violent updrafts that B-29s bounced around like toys, and pilots had to wrestle just to keep their planes in the sky. Some crews landed to find their bombers' aluminum skins warped and buckled from the heat. When dawn broke on March 10th, central Tokyo was a wasteland, 15.8 square miles burned to the ground. The U.S. estimated 83,793 dead, but Japanese sources put the number over 100,000, at least 40,000 wounded, over 1 million suddenly homeless. It was the deadliest air raid anyone had ever seen. Operation Meetinghouse changed everything for the Americans. LeMay wasted no time ordering more raids while his intelligence teams tried to gauge how the Japanese leadership would react. They didn't have to wait long. U.S. radio intercepts caught panic spreading in the government. Emperor Hirohito himself walked through the ruins, reportedly in tears. March 11th, 313 B-29s pummeled Nagoya, wiping out 2 square miles. 2 days later, 274 bombers hit Osaka, setting off a firestorm that devoured another 8 square miles. March 16th, 331 planes struck Kobe, destroying 3 square miles more. By March 19th, the blitz ended with another attack on Nagoya, 290 bombers this time. In just 10 days, the Bomber Command wiped out 32 square miles across Japan's 4 biggest cities, killed over 150,000 people, and left millions without homes. The toll was massive and the strain started to show. Crews were running on fumes. Maintenance teams barely slept, just trying to keep the bombers flying. Worst of all, the command ran out of incendiaries. The Japanese scrambled to respond. Fighter pilots started ramming B-29s, kamikaze attacks, pure desperation. Anti-aircraft guns moved to hit planes flying lower. People got buckets of sand and water, but against napalm, that was just wishful thinking. On the radio, Japanese officials tried to brace the public for a final, decisive battle at home. Then came Okinawa in April, and the B-29s shifted targets for a while. From April 17th to May 11th, they flew over 2,100 sorties against airfields in Kyushu, trying to blunt the kamikaze threat to the invasion fleet. LeMay hated this tactical focus. He wanted to keep pounding Japan's cities to force surrender. Strategic firebombing picked up again on May 23rd, but now at a new scale. LeMay commanded 510 B-29s organized into 5 wings. The 58th Wing had just arrived from China, Burma, India, and the 315th brought radar-equipped bombers for night raids. That day, 558 B-29s swarmed Tokyo more than ever before. Pathfinders lit up new targets in southern districts the March raid had missed. The bombers dropped nearly 3,750 tons of incendiaries, sparking firestorms that merged into one enormous blaze, swallowing 5.3 square miles. Then came May 25th, the biggest raid yet. 500 or 600 B-29s thundered over Tokyo, aiming at the government district around the Imperial Palace. The palace itself was off-limits by order of Secretary of War Henry Stimson, but everything else was fair game. The raid obliterated another 16.8 square miles. Tokyo, as a functioning capital, was gone. Hundreds of bombers overhead in broad daylight crushed what was left of Japanese morale. Pilot Tsuneo Hitoshi of the 244th Fighter Squadron later wrote, "We could only watch helplessly as they destroyed our city. There were too many to attack, like trying to stop a tsunami with your bare hands." By late May, Bomber Command was sending out 500 or more B-29s every other day. Yokohama, Kawasaki, and smaller cities suffered the same fate. Japanese air defenses barely put up a fight anymore. The remaining fighters were being saved for kamikaze attacks during the expected invasion. By August 1945, more than 1,000 B-29s operated from the Marianas. They'd hit 66 of Japan's largest cities, leveling 180 square miles of urban area. Conservative estimates put civilian deaths at 330,000, with 500,000 wounded and at least 8.5 million homeless. Japanese industry was finished. Aircraft production dropped to a tenth of what it was in 1944. Oil refineries stopped working after raids destroyed storage tanks. Even the small workshops making military parts, scattered through residential neighborhoods, vanished under the rubble. But the psychological shock ran even deeper. Prince Fumimaro Konoe, a former prime minister, wrote in his diary, "The people are exhausted, industry is destroyed, and we face starvation." The B-29s have done what enemy armies never could. They brought the war to every Japanese citizen. American losses added up to 414 B-29s from every cause, with about 2,600 airmen killed or missing. That's a loss rate of 1.38% per sortie, way lower than the 5 to 10% the B-17s and B-24s suffered over Germany. The B-29 campaign wasn't just another bombing effort. It completely rewrote the rulebook for how wars get fought. For the first time, strategic bombing alone nearly forced a major power to surrender with no ground invasion needed. The U.S. Strategic Bombing Survey later said Japan would have surrendered by November 1945 even without atomic bombs or invasion, just from the relentless conventional bombing and naval blockade. The campaign's success came from a bunch of technological breakthroughs. The B-29s could fly from bases safely out of enemy range. They used radar to bomb through clouds, hitting targets even when the weather wouldn't cooperate. The M69 incendiary bomb was brutally effective against Japanese cities built mostly of wood and paper. Central fire control systems meant smaller crews so more planes could take off. And the way the 20th Air Force was organized became the blueprint for the independent United States Air Force after 1947. Strategic bombing now stood apart, its own branch of warfare, with special planes, training, and command, not just an offshoot of the Army. Training programs cranked out thousands of sonar operators, bombardiers, and maintenance crews. American naval schools kept pumping out new graduates faster than Japan could hope to match, and that edge only grew as the war dragged on. The B-29 campaign brought together American industry, science, and military strategy. Factories built the world's most advanced bomber. Scientists designed incendiaries made for Japanese targets. Commanders kept changing up their tactics, always looking for a smarter way to hit harder and lose fewer men. When high-altitude precision bombing wasn't working for General Hansel, General LeMay took over and switched to low-level area attacks, burning out entire city blocks instead of just aiming at factories. Pre-war planners thought the future was all about surgical strikes from high above. but reality forced a shift to mass destruction. The moral fallout from these attacks would stick around for decades. LeMay himself once said, "If we'd lost the war, we'd all have been prosecuted as war criminals." Targeting civilians broke with earlier American policies and set precedents that echoed through the nuclear age. The campaign proved Billy Mitchell right. Air power could decide wars. You could win from the sky, crushing an enemy's factories and spirit without ever setting foot on their soil. That idea changed how countries thought about war for generations. Then came August 6, 1945. The Enola Gay, a single B-29, dropped the atomic bomb on Hiroshima. 3 days later, Bockscar hit Nagasaki. These weren't ordinary B-29s. They'd been specially modified for the job. One plane could now deliver the kind of destruction that used to take hundreds. Japan surrendered on August 15, 1945. On September 2nd, as Japanese officials signed surrender papers aboard the USS Missouri, 462 B-29s flew in formation over Tokyo Bay. Their shadows stretched for miles, a silent show of American air power. General LeMay got the Distinguished Service Medal for turning the B-29 force into the most effective strategic bombing campaign in history. He went on to become Chief of Staff of the Air Force and shaped Strategic Air Command through the Cold War. The B-29 kept flying into the Korean War, proving once more how powerful strategic bombing could be. The last one retired in 1960, but its influence never faded. Every modern bomber owes something to the lessons learned in those raids over Japan. Today, concrete markers still stand in the ruins of Tokyo, Osaka, and dozens of other cities, a reminder of those 10 months when silver bombers ruled the skies and ground an entire nation's war machine to dust. The B-29 campaign showed that wars could be won from the air, that factories and technology could tip the scales, and that adapting to real-world conditions mattered just as much as having the best gear. The Superfortress did more than just force Japan to surrender. It completely rewrote the rules of warfare. When LeMay ditched precision bombing for all-out area attacks, he showed that winning isn't just about brute force. It takes guts and a willingness to toss out old ideas when they're not working. By the time Emperor Hirohito finally spoke to his people, the B-29s from the 20th Air Force had already sealed Japan's fate. Their relentless bombing campaign made surrender the only option, and the world had never seen anything like it, and honestly, probably never will again.